the host of Husky Bites. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering, and Husky Bites is sponsored by Michigan Technological University. All right, and I'm going to see if I can actually share screen this week. Let me see if I can do that. First, I have to, I'm on one monitor, so it's harder for me. I'm in Chicago at my remote location. All right, let's see. I'm able to do it this week. Woohoo. See if I can find my slides now. Now you can see all the things I've opened on my desktop. All right, I know I had this open. Here we go. Here we go. Perfect. I went to view show. What am I? I think it's hidden by you guys.
Slideshow.
There we go. Slideshow. Welcome everybody. So we are here, Husky Bites, one more time, season 5. I want to thank the Department of Chemistry for sponsoring this week's Husky Bites with our lead speaker, Dr. Sarah Green, who I will introduce in a moment. And I want to welcome you to World Water Day, which is tomorrow. And at Michigan Tech, we kind of celebrate World Water Week, which is the week of World Water Day. And that's part of why we've asked Dr. Sarah Green to be here, because she's had a passionate interest in water across her whole career, and not just water, but more. So these are some of the events here at Michigan Tech. If you are at Michigan Tech, you can do some of these things. And if you are not, some of them, many of them are available via Zoom. So I encourage you to Google these. So on March 22nd, we have Tribal Water Day, which is sponsored by the Keweenaw Indian community. We've got 9 guest speakers. These are virtual events where you just need to go to mtu.edu/Great Lakes/about/World Water Day with dashes for all these virtual events. And then later that day, there is another set of speakers, and then there's an art exhibit that you might want to catch. So please feel free to enjoy these particular events. All right, so here's my humor for the week. So what's today? So last week on Wednesday, I was walking home up Houghton Avenue, and I come across a gentleman. This is a mechanical engineering senior, and so he's ice picking his car out of its trap. So the melt happened over the past 4 or 5 days, and his car, which he had out on Monday, had completely, I guess, what would you say, pancaked itself, like its tires had melted down with the melt, but the car got stuck on its belly and its bumper and everything by the ice. So he was using a pickaxe to work his way out of that. And I asked him if I could show these pictures, and he said yes. So, but he is going to graduate, so he has good things to hope for. Next week's speaker is Dr. Fernando Ponta, who is one of our mechanical engineering mechanics faculty members, with co-host our famous Apurva, who is a PhD student in mechanical engineering. Well, and so Fernando, Dr. Ponta is an expert on wind power, and we'll see if I can keep him to only a half an hour of talking. We shall see, because he has a lot to say. But we're going to definitely learn something new next week, I assure you. And that's all I wanted to share. So I'm going to stop sharing screen. If I can find that window. There we go. And with that, I would like to introduce, for an on-time start, Dr. Sarah Green. Dr. Green is the interim chair of chemistry, and she has been the department chair of chemistry for more than 9 years. So you can't ever get away from being a chair, Sarah. And she came to us. She's been at Michigan Tech for quite a while. She came in, I believe, 94, and she came to us after having earned her PhD at MIT in oceanography in conjunction with working with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. Prior to that, she earned her bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Minnesota. Her interests are in all aspects of chemistry. They are wide ranging, and so I'm not going to try to describe them because I'll miss some important aspects. But in short, it's from molecular analytical methods to global climate change. Across her career of some notable distinctive events, she was a Jefferson Science Fellow. And during that, she spent a year. Where were you, Sarah? I can't read my own notes here.
I was in Washington, D.C., but I worked on Asia Pacific. So I went multiple times to China, actually, for that year.
Nice. That must have been really, really thrilling. And so what will be, well, I'm going to have Sarah talk about what we'll be speaking about tonight herself. But with that, it's my just distinct honor to introduce Dr. Sarah Green, and for her to then kind of take the show from here.
All right. Thank you, Janet. So I have two students with me who will introduce themselves, or an alumna and a student who will introduce themselves later, but you can see them on the screen, Ayush and Jessica. And I guess I should start right away by sharing my screen. And going into Google Chrome, Husky Bites.
Well, and of course, Jessica is Dr. Daignault now.
Yes. More informal in my world. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. This is my first Husky Bites, so it's exciting to see this roll out. I've been in the audience at a few, but not a presenter very much. We're in this venue before. And I have already failed because I have written right big in my notes that I need to talk about water because of World Water Week, and I have really failed to do that. So you'll just have to recognize that climate change is a big driver of water and droughts in the West and extreme events and storms everywhere, more dry and more wet. And look at the bigger picture here, which is trying to address climate change and the climate crisis itself. So following the Husky Bites tradition that I've seen by seeing other Husky Bites, I'll do a little introduction of me and my trajectory here. So I came from Minnesota, did chemistry in Smith Hall there at University of Minnesota, which was right across the street, across the mall from where my dad worked in the mathematics department. So I'm a faculty child who grew up at the University of Minnesota. I went and did a PhD in marine chemistry at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in their joint program with MIT. And I was totally excited to see this lab building, the Phi building that I did all of my work in, is now covered with solar panels. It's got a huge roof covered with solar panels. I then did a postdoc in chemistry at UT Austin and didn't once go to a football game. Sorry, football fans. I'm not good at that part. I then came to Michigan Tech, and I've been chair, as Janet said. I was chair for 9 years. I'm back. I'm currently as interim chair, but between those times, I went to Washington, where I was a Jefferson Science Fellow. This is a picture from inside the State Department building with all the flags from all the countries that have and consulates. And through connections there, I got involved with the United Nations Environmental Program, and I served as a science advisor for the GEO6 report, which is a picture there. You can look up that report. It's looks at the global environment. And I like living here in Houghton, where I live right on the lake. I have solar panels on my own roof. I have a window I can see deer strolling by in the spring, and I walk down on the lake with a dog just about every day. And try not to take too many pictures, although there's really a lot of pictures I get from the lake, winter and summer and sunsets. So as a chemist, how did I get interested in climate? Well, I've been interested in environmental issues for a long time, but periodic table, notice, has got carbon as an important element in it, and carbon and also nitrogen, which we don't talk about as much, are huge drivers of environmental change. And they're the elements, well, of course, humans have interacted with many of those elements and changed their cycling around the planet in many ways. But disrupting the carbon cycle is actively changing the climate right now. So I consider chemistry really to be a keystone in climate issues because it's at the crux of movement of materials and of energy around the planet. And so it affects everything. And here is one of many cartoons showing the carbon cycle. And I don't know, does my mouse show up on there? Can you see my mouse? Anybody? Yeah, my mouse with a little cursor, circle around, donut mouse. So we have carbon on the terrestrial side, plants taking up carbon dioxide, carbon stored in soils, carbon emitted as carbon dioxide from fossil fuel combustion. There's cycles, carbon dioxide coming into and out of the ocean. And these numbers in red here are the ones that are impacted by humans. So fossil fuels, obviously, as humans, the extra carbon, this is in gigatons per year of carbon dioxide going into the ocean is because there's excess carbon going into the atmosphere. And so the net increase right now is roughly 2 gigatons of carbon per year. And I'm not going to talk about, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I'm not going to talk so much about the science of climate change itself, because we want to talk about COP. So what about COP and YAY? So YAY is the Youth Environmental Alliance in Higher Education, and it's a network. There's a lot of words here for NSF, but basically we are trying to empower students across all disciplines to collaborate together to gain some real world experience. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the cat howling. We have an ancient.
We can, and I was wondering whose cat it was, and so she thinks you're talking to her. Clearly, right?
Yeah. She's an ancient cat, and she just squawks. It's the noise she makes. She just talks. So our goal here with YAY is we have a whole bunch of different projects and activities. We have joint classes and whatnot, but one of our activities is getting students engaged in the policy process through climate policy. So it's led by Michigan Tech and Colorado State. We have a whole slew of other universities involved here, and we're funded by NSF. So lots of people involved in various degrees during different years. So time for my first poll. Hey, I think Sue Hill is going to do this, right?
Yes, so I'm going to read it out. When was the Global Climate Treaty adopted? And then we have 5 choices: 1857, 1972, 1992, 1997, and 2015. All right, so I'm going to make a guess here of 72, because that's the majority vote.
That's what everybody else is doing. Well,
1857 is clearly too early, right?
Yeah, so I didn't pull that number out of a hat, though. That was the first known cross-border environmental treaty, and it was between Switzerland, Germany, and I think Austria, having to do with the Lake Constance and who is going to have the water in Lake Constance. So
very cool.
It is an actual date on the on the calendar.
Well, this is a Husky Bites first. Every Zoom attendee answered 100 out of 100. No, wait, I'm sorry. There's 129. I don't know why I was reading that. But anyway, continue.
100. So I'm just going to flip because I have another slide that has the answer on it. But I can't, because I can't do them till
just
I stop.
If you still see the poll, just close it.
There we go.
Close
there we
little...
go. Share. Okay, I got to close the poll thing. All right, so the first climate treaty was in 1992. 1972 was significant because that was some also environmental treaties set up by the UN, but they were not climate treaties. They had to deal with cross-border pollution. So you see that the United Nations has been involved with environmental issues for a long time, starting from recognizing that if you're going to predict weather across a border, you need to share data with the people on the other side of the border to do weather data. But 1992 was the first climate treaty. It was adopted in Rio, and it established the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the overarching treaty that deals with global climate. It's got lots of subparts. We're not going to talk about all the subparts. There's way too many of them.
We all faked out by thinking it was 72, do you think?
72. I don't know. Well, 72 is Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act.
Okay. That
US.
must have been.
Yeah, so it's significant for US. Maybe establishment of the EPA was around then as well. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. Okay, so what is COP? When we talk about COP, we're in COP 77. So, hang on, I gotta get my mouse in the right place here. So the UNFCCC is the overriding convention. And to implement this treaty, we have a secretariat that does all the background paperwork, if you like, and organizing and coordination. We have a body on implementation and a body on scientific and technical advice. And that's where all of the technical decisions get made, like what do we have to measure? How are we going to measure it? Who's going to report it? How are they going to report it? How are we going to track things? How are we going to have feedback mechanisms? Lots and lots of nitty gritty stuff going on in there. The Conference of the Parties is the annual meeting in which all of these entities come together and make decisions. So the decisions are the implementation steps of the convention. And you'll see on the right there, I mentioned the Kyoto Agreement and the Paris Agreement. Both of those are underneath the Convention on Climate Change. Both still exist. And on the side here, the IPCC. IPCC is a body of scientific experts, and they pull together the data from the scientific literature and knowledge from the scientific literature and issue the big reports that you've seen now. Most recently, the 6th report gets more, has been getting increasing media attention every year as the situation becomes more dire. So they published the first of 3 volumes of their major 6th report in August last year. It's the physical basis of climate change. In February, just now, they published the impacts report, and they'll publish a mitigation report sometime during the summer. So those things are thousands of pages. They're free. You can get them online. You can scrutinize the data. You can, So that's the scientific basis that feeds into these other bodies. All right, so at the COP, so it happens every year except for 2020 pandemic year, it was postponed. It is, I've seen it described by several people as a 3-ring circus, but they don't always agree on what the rings are. Sometimes they have different rings. But I think of it as the parties. So those are the decision makers. They come from governments, they're negotiators, and they're in the orange box there. And then the thing that I put in the green ring is mostly civil society. So it's NGOs. So business is not represented at this. However, they can be represented through NGOs. So business groups can be represented. And NGOs, and Michigan Tech is approved as an NGO, as an observer body to the COP. And then outside of the COP are activists. Some of them are part of the NGOs as well. And so all of these things are going on simultaneously, and they're all important, right? The negotiations would not make progress unless there was push from the activists and support from the civil society and research brought in by civil society observers, including universities and think tanks and other groups, and groups focused on justice, and groups focused on indigenous rights, and groups focused on human rights. And so that, luckily, my green ring overlaps with the negotiations, because civil society has some ability to observe the negotiations, a small ability to make statements sometimes during the negotiations, but also the negotiators come to the events that are put on by civil society. And so there's mutual learning, and there's a lot of mutual networking that's going on in these that moves the process forward. So here's some pictures from the three-ring circus. So we think of these big negotiating rooms. Everybody, this is taken from the back. All those people are delegates with a nameplate from their country in front of them on the top. In the big session, they also meet in many, many, many smaller sessions to hash out specific points. Lots of things going on in the hallways or in small groups, as during coffee breaks and whatnot. A lot of negotiating takes place in these one-to-one or small group sessions. So that's John Kerry. John Kerry, by the way, was everywhere at this meeting. He was everywhere. You said, yeah. One of our students from Colorado State ran smack into John Kerry in the hallway because he was running from one place to another.
Sarah, how many of our students went to this event in Glasgow?
So I forgot to put a slide of how many students went. So we're allowed 5 slots over a 2-week period, and we split them week to week. So we have, so we were able to bring 9, because I went for 2 weeks this year, and we had students from mechanical engineering, humanities. We had a couple of alumni. We had, Ayush, help me, where else did people come from? Chemistry alum.
Environmental policy.
Right. The environmental and energy policy group have been coming. Get rid of the cat here. Go on, get down. The other cat. So we had a group of 9 from Michigan Tech for each week, and then we interact through the Yay network with some, I think 15 or more from other universities. So Colorado State, Indiana, some of the others on that list, Connecticut, Vanderbilt, quite a few, and they were all off doing their own thing, and then we would come together occasionally in small groups as much as possible, as much as we could, which was not often.
And are those old activists out there?
So those are activists. That picture actually is from London, but there were also activists around the outside. Maybe some of you have pictures of them around outside of the venue. There was a big demonstration in Glasgow itself. I took a picture of the blah, blah, blah on a nearby storefront, quoting Greta. So every day so you needed a badge to get into the venue, and there were many small and sort of medium-sized sort of constant demonstrations or groups outside, and then they had several major ones. So activists are also allowed inside the venue. Actually, if they have badges, they're allowed to stage demonstrations in careful quotes, because they all have to be sort of approved and pre-arranged with the secretariat. So they can set up a little spot and say, we want to do highlight a certain action, but they're very prescribed. So when Greta comes, sometimes there's a little demonstration around her. So, and this picture of the U.S. Center is just in that other part of the side events and pavilions. It's like a trade show where NGOs and governments can set up events, and they do panel discussions every day, all day, some of them. The US was very, very busy there. So we had Obama, we had Secretary Granholm, we had Secretary Buttigieg, we had many, many secretaries coming on different days and hosting a whole range of events. Okay, I am not watching the time here. I'm going to get over time. I'm going to give you guys time to do your thing here. Okay, so number of people who are attending COP has gone up drastically from the first one, and that was in Berlin. And the red is the current year. I was going to make this a poll question, but it just seemed too hard. Like how many people are there? Many, many. The party delegations, so can bring however many people they think they need to negotiate what it is that they're negotiating. There are observer states, that is Holy See, and maybe Palestine, and a few others with sort of ambiguous nationhood. The Secretariat has a bunch. The UN specialized agencies would be like the Food and Agriculture Organization, the Human Rights or the Migration UN organizations, and then a whole bunch of NGOs, and then a whole bunch of media. So it's roughly a little over half are actual negotiators or with negotiating parties.
Sarah,
so
you said
yeah.
this. What were we? What of those categories were we?
Oh, so we fall under the NGO observers.
Okay.
Yeah, so Michigan Tech, we had to actually go through quite a process to become an observer. You can't just sign up. You have to prove that you have that your organization has some climate interest or some interest in relevant activities. So, and as an NGO, as a university, we fall under kind of a constituency group of other research organizations. So, so which countries sent the most delegates? Any idea? Whole people here?
And so we have 5 choices: Russia, China, Brazil, India, or the United States. And people are furiously entering their polls, and it looks like the United States is leading. Let's see if this one's right, because we did not pass the first poll question as a body.
Yeah, I actually did not know the answer to this one, so this is not one I can expect everyone else to know either. I would not have known this, and then I thought about it and I got some ideas why it might be, but I did not know the answer.
All right, from that, I'm surmising that we're wrong. What's the answer? What's the answer?
All right, so the answer is here. The answer is Brazil. Brazil, and you'll see down here the Democratic Republic of Congo had a pretty big population. United States was lean and mean. We were everywhere. But I think there's a bunch of things that go into this. One is probably some countries have a little bit more of a, let's say, I don't really want to say corruption, but a little bit more of a who's in the government gets to get perks and travel to Glasgow. And I suspect that some countries had their delegation just for that. The United States probably doesn't need as many people in their official delegation because they have a large support from other NGOs. So probably a large number of the universities are US. The IPCC delegation has a lot of US scientists. The cryosphere group has a lot of US scientists. They probably don't need as many in the official delegation. China is fairly particular, I learned in the State Department, about who it allows to travel outside of the country and for what period of time, how long they can go. So they don't usually send huge groups. 60 is probably pretty big for them. India, I don't know, maybe Ayush could say something about India, and Russia, I don't know what was driving them. Brazil is very interested, has a very big interest because there's a lot of talk about nature-based solutions and about deforestation. And so they push on that. All right, oops, I went backwards somehow. Okay. Yay at COP. So what did we get to do? So we don't just go as observers to observe, we actually participate. And my colleague there is shown in the lower left, Gillian, next to Daniel, who is a former student of hers who lives in Glasgow now, is working with Yay. Daniel actually got to make a statement for the official Ringo, which is the research constituency that we're under. But Gillian has been to COPs far before I did, and she figured out that you could just sign up and do a news conference, or sign up and do some side events, or sign up and do these panels like Voices of Optimism, Agents of Change. And so that Voices of Optimism is our students doing an event. And Jessica, are you in that picture above? The other one is a similar event at COP25. And we get an audience. Not you, no. Okay, so I'm gonna get going here so that I can switch and hand it over to Jessica. She can tell you what they actually did.
Thanks, Sarah.
Can you do you want to share and control the screen, or
I can just say next slide when it's time. Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Jessica Daignault. I am currently an assistant professor at Montana Technological University, teaching in the civil engineering department here. But I am a product of Michigan Tech, and I got all 3 of my degrees from there. I love Michigan Tech. Started right out of high school with environmental engineering, went and worked in industry for 4 years, and along the way got my master's degree, and ultimately pursued a PhD because I had this goal of teaching and influencing the next generation of engineers. So that's been really gratifying to work with students in my current position. I was born in Detroit, but raised in the UP. And so things like outdoor recreation are super important to me. I also love creative outlets and spending time with my family and pets. As far as professional interests go, I'd say, my top interest these days is engineering education excellence, and just really focusing on being a great instructor, because I find that, a lot of students need excellent teachers along with teachers who are really good at research. And so just seeing that gap and really wanting to fill it. Kind of research interests, life cycle assessment. So looking at products from, when they're extracted from the earth right up to the time that you can buy them in a store, or when they get put in the landfill, seeing what those environmental impacts are. I'm super interested in construction and infrastructure, and that just comes from working in industry for a while and getting to design projects that actually get built and seeing that process. And then, there's the hot topics these days that are super interesting and everyone has to care about it, which is adaptation, resilience, and sustainability. If you're producing a product or marketing anything nowadays, you need to care about, what went into creating it and what impact is it going to have, because consumers care about that nowadays. And then for COP, kind of my focus in going to the meetings this year, or this past year, was really focusing on sessions that looked at infrastructure investment, policies related to infrastructure investment, and then, also sustainable resource management, and, just resilience in the face of a changing climate. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit briefly about the first experience I had participating in COP. So I was fortunate enough to attend COP 25 in Madrid during my PhD. And this was a wild experience because, you get thrown into this massive meeting, and like Sarah said, it's a three-ring circus for sure. It's just massive convention centers, and at any hour of any day, you could attend 10 different interesting events or sessions or negotiations. And so it's hard to choose how to spend your time. But I prioritize going to press conferences to support our peers. Like Sarah said, we did, give some talks and press conferences. I attended a lot of side events. And those are basically, any institution or organization can put on a side event where they want to talk to you about some topic of interest. So those are great. And I focused a lot on water resource related talks the first year. One of my favorite talks I went to was the Climate Action for Jobs initiative, because there's a lot of discussion around, if we're going to phase out fossil fuels or switch technologies, what does that mean for jobs? And this was actually a talk with the UN Secretary General, and he just highlighted that, there's tons of opportunities linked with a climate neutral economy. And that, as we make the shift, we just need to make sure that we're fair and inclusive and make sure that people have the opportunities to pursue those jobs. Could you go back a slide, please, Sarah? Thank you. And then, high level events. Those are super cool. You can sit in on negotiations. You can watch the countries give their statements, talk about what's important to them. And here, I don't agree with this country because of this reason. I would like to say my piece. And that's just really enlightening to see what's going on in everybody's country and hear their perspective. Youngo, that is a really cool NGO for youth. And so we were able to attend some Youngo meetings. This picture here is kind of related to the last two bullets. So in this photo, there's myself and 3 other graduate students from Michigan Tech at the COP25. And then we're sitting with Dominique Souris from Canada, and she runs the Youth Climate Lab. And then we're also sitting with Ambassador Jumeau, who is the ambassador to the United States from the Republic of Seychelles. And this was a super cool meeting because we were able to sit down with these two and learn about how a lot of small countries, they come to these events and they need support. And so there's organizations like the Youth Climate Lab that exist literally to train young people to support these smaller countries and nations with resources and information. And that was just a really cool thing to see and experience. Next slide, please. And then just one other quick thing about COP25 is that was an interesting year because that was when the United States was withdrawn from the Paris Agreement. And so a lot of the negotiations, are revolving around finalizing the Paris Agreement and what was discussed to be implemented. And so the United States did have an official delegation present, but they didn't have a booth or anything in the I'm trying to think of what the word is called, but just basically the hall of where all the booths are for the different countries and whatnot. And so what we had was a subnational delegation. So this was local governments. Michael Bloomberg ran the show. It was, people from different communities or organizations that wanted to give talks related to US policy and saying that even if our federal government isn't participating in this, we would like to. And so that was a really interesting dynamic to witness. One of my favorite parts of going to the We Are Still In Center was seeing a colleague in the photo here with me and my colleague Will. Our other colleague Tim Smith from the University of Minnesota was there giving a talk, and we were able to catch up with him. And that was really cool because we've done research together for years, and to just get to network like that at an international conference was really, really cool. And then finally, we had the chance to go to the US Embassy in Madrid. So tons of stuff this first COP. I mean, it was just endless experiences that we got to have. And at the embassy, we just learned about, Spain's initiatives and kind of what it means to be, working at an embassy post and getting to interact with them. So that was really great. So moving on to COP26, I went into this one a little more prepared, a little more familiar with how to spend my time. And I had a more tunnel vision focus. And that was, I'm in this position now where I'm educating the next generation of engineers. They're primarily civil engineers, and they need to care about infrastructure investment and development. And this is their future. These are the things they're going to be working on and designing. So I wanted to really focus on learning about, what is it about adaptation and resilience and infrastructure and construction and civil engineering that we need to be caring about. And I was motivated in part by this statement by the American Society of Civil Engineers stating, we as engineers play a critical role in reducing carbon emissions from our infrastructure. And that's so true. I mean, concrete makes up a ton of our infrastructure and it has extremely high CO2 emissions. And so we need to be thinking about what materials are we using? How are we doing our designs? And another thing that stood out to me with this statement was, we're going to expect changes to design standards, codes, regulations. We want to strengthen the sustainability and resilience of our infrastructure. And so I felt like it was really important for me to see what's happening on a global level. And then also what's happening in our own country as far as policy and infrastructure investment goes. And so this here is just a little clip to show why I was motivated. And then this next slide here shows some things that I was interested in at the US Center. So I spent a lot of time at the US Center at this COP, networking with other Americans and of course people from around the world. But it was really cool because we have all of these people from our government there in person and you have the opportunity to talk to them, interact with them, ask them questions. So this photo on the upper right, that's Administrator Reagan, and he's the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. So very relevant in a water resources or environmental realm. And then the photo on the bottom right here, that's Mayor Pete or Secretary Buttigieg giving a talk on green transportation. And so these are people we see on the TV all the time. And it was really, really cool to be in the same room as them with these discussions going on. So some of the topics were, climate smart infrastructure. I don't know how many people on this call are familiar with the big Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so there's just billions of dollars right now coming available to communities for investment in infrastructure. And so, these people were doing a lot of talking about how should we use it? What will be most meaningful? How do we make sure it's fair and equitable? And how do we get this money to our communities? And that was really cool to hear. So yeah, clean transportation, resilience in a transitioning energy infrastructure. Let's see what else, talking about adaptation at home and in vulnerable countries. The US supports a lot of these smaller countries that are struggling. And then, adaptation. And I loved, a lot of these sessions included sessions on just, like I said, equality and equity, but that includes gender equality and just really promoting women in these roles and girls in these roles. And obviously to me, that's super important. And I want to make sure that, my female students know they have a place in the engineering world. So yeah, to conclude my section here, I wanted to focus kind of on what the US committed to at the COP. So we did rejoin the Paris Agreement. And our federal government has a goal of net zero emission economy by 2050. So that's really not that far away. And then a commitment to reduce emissions by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030. And that's just around the corner. So lots of work to be done. There's also a couple plans about, methane emissions reductions, climate finance. And then there was a big launch of Prepare. So President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, so a federal initiative on that. And then a pledge to end new international finance for unabated fossil fuels by the end of 2022, so end of this year. And then, like Sarah was mentioning, there was a big focus on, we want to preserve our carbon sinks. We want to have these efforts to reduce deforestation. And then there was also a joint declaration with China, which was a big deal about increased coal abatement and then reductions in methane emissions. So yeah, I loved learning a lot about what's going on in our country. And it was interesting that it took place across the pond, but I met amazing people at the US Center and now have these fantastic contacts to keep networking with and, working with, because we're all going to be focusing on these challenges in the coming years.
Thanks, Jessica.
Questions related to engineering and COP, throw them in the chat.
I'm going to hand it over next to Ayush. I feel like we all had such a great time that we're just can't stop talking about it.
I know, and I'm going to jump in because I can see we're going to be using more than normal of our time speaking. So in the Q&A, if you would like to answer a question by writing an answer. If it's very specific to what we just talked about, go ahead and do that. But don't eliminate all the questions, please. But all of the speakers, go ahead and I think, does your last slide have all of your emails? I don't know if
we
it
can
does.
put them in the.
I can type it in chat.
Okay,
you can put
because
them
I
in.
have a feeling we're going to end up with questions, because this is a lot of people are going to be curious. So, all right, Ayush.
Hello, my name is Ayush Chitwani. So I was born and raised in a city called Faridabad, which is a national capital region in India. It's near New Delhi. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and then I worked in a defense aerospace company. And then I came at Michigan Tech for my master's in 2017. I graduated with my master's in 2019, and then I went back home and started working in a renewable energy company. During that time, I got an opportunity for a PhD position at Michigan Tech. And my pitch was, I have lived there for two and a half years. I'm really comfortable with snow. So I guess like that was the deal maker, and I got accepted for this role. So right now I am doing a PhD with my advisor, Dr. Anna Dearson. Our project is basically I would be working on snow mitigation strategies for single axis solar tracker. So basically you have fixed solar panels which you can fix on like roofs and fixed structures, but there are single axis trackers which move with sun, so you can have like higher generation. And in these areas where there is a lot of snow, actually when you have a moving structure, you can actually control the structure on how to move if it's snowing. So you can tilt it more so snow sheds off. So we are going to study that, like about controls of that part. And the project site is this is a new under development site near APS Labs. If any of you are from Michigan Tech, there are solar panels, and it is being handled by Sandia Labs, and it is in collaboration with Michigan Tech. And DOE actually controls all this, and they have given Sandia Labs a contract for 3 years to maintain all these like different sites.
Well, and I'm just going to interrupt and say that we are the northern one of these sites, and real honor that they picked Michigan Tech as the site sponsor. And so if there's any companies out there who need a place to test solar panels in a northern climate, we have a facility. If you land in the Houghton Airport, you drive right by it on your left on your way into town. It's right there on the airport.
Yes. So it is one of the one of the 5 in United States, and only the best one for the northern climate, since we have a lot of snow. My experience at COP26. So basically, I joined the course UN 5400 because it mentioned that we get to go and follow the whole process of like UN climate change conference. So I did not know it was called as COP. So I used to refer it as climate change conference, but then COP became like conference of parties. It's a like nickname, or it's usually referred to it as like COP. So, and since we had like a small class this year, only like 3 students were there. So we all get to go. And we were following the development on COP since the class, like learning more about like what was the history of it. So it's like a really good course. I would suggest, like, even if you are interested in taking a course, so take this course. During the COP, I was very interested in like knowing how the decisions are being made. Means as an engineer and with a master's, I know there is science, there is technology, but during my time while working in India, there was a lot of like loopholes in the policies, like they are not being promoted. So we had a good technology, like solar panels are there, and then why are they not being implemented on ground? So I was very interested in like different viewpoints of different stakeholders, like why the big countries like USA, India, China, and EU, like where they come from while they are like making a statement on these things. And the sessions between like scientists and negotiators was also very interesting. Like we have an IPCC AR6 report. The physical basis came out, and a lot of like negotiators, they are not from scientific background. Some of them are like ministers in their countries, so they want to know more about the science which has been written in the report. And they actually they hold sessions where scientists are on a panel, and a lot of like common people, negotiators, they come up to the podium and then ask questions like, can you clarify this point or these points, or they just simply make statement or make their presence known, like, yeah, we do not agree with these points or something like that. So it was very interesting to know the viewpoints of everyone. And I get to feature in a side event. It was kind of like a virtual event, Voices of Change and Optimism in the first week, and the below photograph is for the panel discussion with it. And my takeaway from COP is basically, I want to visit this year too, it's happening in Egypt. And this year I would be going with a much broader understanding of the dynamics between different countries. And now I have a technological base too. Like I know like this renewable energy technologies need these kind of like policies to make drive them faster. And yes, and in the end, there are 2 points which for me personally was like, this was the biggest and the most diverse conference I have ever attended in my life. There were people from every part of the world. They were speaking every languages. They were dressed differently. There were representation from indigenous people, genders, different races and regions. So it was like kind of like very like heartwarming to see like, yes, it's not like your run-of-the-mill academic conference where you see only like one kind of representation. It's like scientists, politicians, negotiators, activists. So yes, and youth was also a big part of it, and I get to enjoy like a session for like a UN Youth Assembly. I was just sitting there and listening to all these like young people, like they are like 14 years old, 17 years old, and they are doing way big things that we have done in our 17 years. Next slide, please. So these are some of the photographs from my camera that I took. As a column, the 2 interesting ones are, so part of the COP was daily going from like our Airbnb to the vacation to the venue. So we used to take like the Glasgow train, and it was like a daily thing. So this is the central picture is one of our like our 3 students from the UN 5400 class with Dr. Green taking the subway and a train to the venue. The bottom left is one of the Glasgow, University of Glasgow. So Daniel, who made the statement for Ringo in the end, studies there. So he took us there and we saw, so it's like a university which is made in a castle. So it's very interesting to see like a different architecture. So, and this is the, on the top right, I get to see the one of the protests where Zeta was speaking. So officially we could not go into the protest. So unofficially, I took a photograph. I missed her. Like, so the march actually went ahead. So they went into the one of the parks in the Glasgow, like Calvin Grove Park. So yes, so these are some of my activities and experiences at COP. And next slide, please. So this particular phrase has been in media a lot, and when I came back from COP and we had to submit our final project report, I decided to actually focus more on the text, like why the text plays a important role. Like we have like 2 weeks of discussions and negotiations. So what happens with the text? And this is the phrase which I think actually sank the whole pact. So you can see like how the official like drafts were released. Like on 10th November, they first mentioned the word phasing out in highlighted in yellow, and subsidies for fossil fuels. This is the first time which I read like the coal and fossil fuels have specifically been mentioned in an international document. But as you go, like there are different stakeholders and they do not want like they do not agree on it. So the word phase out the unabated coal was attached, and inefficient subsidies was attached, and then in the final, like, so there's like a lot of like drama for the final text. So on the 13th November at 6 p.m., the final day, this was the text which was approved. and everybody was there in the big plenary hall, and all of the delegates were there. And when the president Alok Sharma announced final call upon parties and the phase down, like they removed phase out to phase down of unabated coal and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. I, as I discussed, my point of view is like it was kind of like premeditated, because like all the delegations had their statements ready, but they made their speech and they say like we disagree with that, but we are making a compromise, and huge drama was there. And Dr. Green mentioned there's a thing called like huddle politics or like huddle diplomacy, where like giant huddle of like negotiators from like USA, China, India, and everyone was like mixing with different groups of people, just like finally agreeing on the text. And like this is the final text on one particular thing which was agreed. I guess like Dr. Green can highlight more on this particular phrase.
No, I did a really good job of really digging into the text, which is where all the guts of things are happening are. And the Glasgow Climate Pact is the final decision, the top level decision that came out of this. And so we don't go too much overtime. I'll just put my highlights from that, and then I'll just switch to discussion. So some of the really key outcomes were that we're aiming for 1.5 degrees. It still may be possible if we cut our emissions rapidly. The final Paris Agreement rules were agreed to, which is important. We pushed for a faster timeline on reviewing the emissions from each country. And there were advances on climate finance agreements among countries. So I'm gonna stop there, because Janet wants us to have time for questions, and we were so excited we just talked too much.
All right, I'm gonna only say a few more words because I'm on my Wi-Fi hotspot. The house internet didn't work for me here on this Airbnb. So Sarah, can you lead the kind of conclusion and thank everybody and everything? And I'm just going to stay quiet while you guys handle the rest.
Okay. So I think there were some questions in the Q&A but mostly we've answered them. So I don't see the chat. Is there a chat somewhere?
So yeah, the audience can't chat, so the audience can answer Q&A. And if you click on the answered questions, if you want to like go over any of those, you can.
Okay.
I'll call out one. I don't know if my audio is coming through, from Donald Parander, who just remembers Dr. Barry and enjoying his lectures.
Dr. Barry was before Janet's time and before my time, and he was a legend. He taught so many students first-year chemistry for decades and decades that he is well and long remembered. And I did meet him. He kept coming to department events even into his 90s. And one of my favorite stories is that a former student stopped by his office one time, and Dr. Barry said, "Oh, hey, John, how are you? How is everything going?" And "Yeah, you were in my class 10 years ago." And then he said, "And how's Kevin?" And John said, "Kevin, who's Kevin?" And Dr. Barry said, "Oh, Kevin used to sit next to you every day in first year chemistry in this class with 300 students." Dr. Barry remembered him, even though the guy who was actually there didn't. So yeah, he is definitely a legend. And let's see, what else am I supposed to do here? Janet, I'm supposed to remind everybody to go to the next Husky Bites. And you know where it is. Yeah.
Well, is my audio coming through?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let me just, because we're really close to on the hour and we really try to honor ending at 6. And so I just would like to encourage everyone, if you have any unanswered questions, to contact either Dr. Sarah Green at Michigan Tech or Dr. Daignault, who is now at Montana State University in Bozeman, right?
Yep.
Montana Tech in Butte.
or Ayush, who is a mechanical engineering Butte. Thank you. And if you can put your emails into the chat, I think that would be really helpful. And so from me, I want to thank you all. I'm jealous that you got to go to Glasgow because I think it's a really cool country to visit, have given some of my Scottish heritage. And, you know, thank you for making a difference in the world. And, you know, I agree. Well, I would just want to comment, I guess, Jessica, that your passion carries through, and thank you for bringing this to all the students you're teaching. And Ayush, I mean, your life is living it, right? You're doing your own research in the area that's going to help, you know, bring us power throughout, you know, without any carbon fuels. And of course, there's going to be a lot of, everything has to work together for us to have a solution moving forward. But most of all, thank you, Sarah, for inspiring all these students, you know, to make this part of their walk in life. And with that, I want to kind of turn it over first to Jessica to give some closing remarks, then to Ayush, and then Sarah, if you could make some final closing remarks, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, in closing, I guess I really would like to reiterate thank you to Sarah for doing the hard work to get Michigan Tech, you know, registered as an observer to the United Nations. And it really opened up a path to me that I never would have expected in my life. And it's been amazing. So thank you. And also in closing, if there's anyone on the call who's interested in doing grad school at Montana Tech, you should definitely email me.
There is one particular quote that I highlight. It's written by me, and I have been using it like everywhere. So it goes like this: we would not be judged by gods when we die, but by the future generations on how we leave them the planet. So it encompasses my true feeling. Like every decision you make actually impact your future generations. So it's high time. Do not think about yourself. Think about your future. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I guess we got our last minute here. And so I need to thank lots of people. I need to thank National Science Foundation, and I need to thank Gillian Bowser and all of the YAY participants and students and YAY fellows and other YAY people. I also need to thank the Institute for Policy, Ethics and Culture, IPEC, at Michigan. It's a new institute at Michigan Tech. And they are really important on this. They've helped fund us. And they are part of the recognition that science and technology is not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And that many of the problems now are no longer strictly technical, but they're, as Jessica knows, and political and economic, and how to manage transitions really requires a full complement of human ingenuity. And I especially have to thank all of the YAY students because they're so enthusiastic, and it's just fantastic to see them just take this bull by the horns, as it were, and move forward to make a new future for us. And thanks to the audience for listening to us. Thank you much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. It'll be focused on harnessing energy from the wind, which will be very exciting. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.